So this is our neighborhood panel. I can't talk quite as fast as Peter Zalewski, so you might not get through quite as much information today. I think Peter probably has a second career as an auctioneer, if real estate ever falls through for him. So it's no secret that Miami is becoming a global city with more cultural offerings, architecture, and a lot more going on than ever before. And part of this evolution has been the birth of many more emerging neighborhoods with their own unique character, from Wynwood to Mimo to parts of downtown and Doral. It's a huge part of what makes Miami exciting to tourists and locals alike today. So today we have some of the key developers who have helped birth some of these new neighborhoods. In figuring out the DNA of these new neighborhoods, these developers are obviously reaping big rewards, but they face equally big risks too. And some have the unenviable task of having to almost compete against themselves as they expand, as areas they've shaped become hotter. Not to mention the followers and imitators. Avra, Jain told me that she's even had her car tailed while looking at properties in new neighborhoods. So we're going to find out what's next in all these areas in the next 45 minutes, and we'll open it up for some audience Q&A at the end too. So I'm going to welcome our panelists. You can raise your hand when I call you out. Developer Avra Jain. Avra's been pivotal in the birth of the Mimo neighborhood. She snapped up 7 historic but dilapidated motels along Biscayne Boulevard Strip and sought to remake them. They include the Vagabond, which opened last year, and she's also branching out into the Miami River area as well. Welcome. Nitin Motwani is next, who I found out went to the same undergraduate, graduate, and has kids the same age as me in looking at his bio today. All of 35, Nitin spent years doggedly piecing together the land for South Florida's biggest impending development, Miami Worldcenter. The $1.7 billion mixed-use project will blanket 27 acres of Overtown in downtown Miami when completed. And that includes the biggest hotel in Miami, a Macy's, Bloomingdale's, condos, and rentals. Welcome. Next up, we have Michael Comras. Michael's company has been a big player in the most popular shopping destination in Miami, Lincoln Road. And last month, he sold an entire block there for $370 million, the second priciest deal in Miami-Dade history. He bought it for $12 million in 2000. So that's 30 times what he paid, which I would call a pretty good return on investment. We're going to find out what he's doing with that money today, too, hopefully. We can at least ask. He's also active in Coconut Grove in the Design District. Welcome. Next up is Anna Codina. Anna is the CEO of Codina Partners, whose signature project is downtown Doral, which is seeking to create a vibrant and walkable heart to a sprawling neighborhood. When the project's complete, it's going to include 8 condo towers, 1 million square feet of office space, a charter school, and 70 stores. And a 20-story residential tower is already pre-sold. And finally, Joe hails from Wynwood, and he's the managing director of Goldman Properties, which is one of the largest landowners in the neighborhood, with investments that were started by the late pioneer Tony Goldman. He's also the chairman of the Wynwood Business Improvement District, and he's now turning his focus to Wynwood 2.0, a slew of projects in coming months. So we'll hear more about that shortly. Thanks, Joe. So one thing I want to do starting off is to talk about the future of neighborhoods that you've helped shape. Maybe each one of you can cite a positive statistic that indicates the neighborhood has a bright future. And on the flip side, what's your biggest concern, whether it's market, something the city needs to do, anything like that? Who wants to give it a go?
Just so you know, this neighborhood has been my baby for the last 8 years, so I know a little bit about it, and I'm very, very happy to share what I know and the future that we're so excited about for Wynwood. So I think we have a lot to talk about with Wynwood. We've been working for the last 2 years to create a new zoning and planning designation for the area. And we don't have the good fortune of what Nitin has, where we can go through the special area plan process. We have a lot of different owners that need to buy into one unified vision and a consensus. So for the last 2 years working with the city, we have that. And what's really exciting is we've created a framework that allows Wynwood to flourish into the future, allowing more types of uses such as residential, more hotel. We've changed the neighborhood from light industrial to general commercial. But one piece that I want to note, the reason why we're here and the reason why Wynwood is so relevant in the first place is that actually we had very restrictive zoning over the last many years. And what's great about that is rather than waiting in the typical Miami cycle for a development boom, it forced us to be creative with our real estate, to adaptively reuse existing buildings, and to create content and a sense of place that made Wynwood what it is today. Without doing that and without reinventing what was already there, we'd be sort of in any other land or warehouse district around the country, and there'd be no relevance, and I wouldn't be here speaking today. So it's a really exciting time, but I also don't want to really lose sight on what brought us here in the first place.
Mm-hmm. I just want to ask a quick follow-up question on that. So on Northwest 2nd Avenue, you've seen rents go from $10 a square foot 10 years ago to $80 per square foot today. What impact, where do you see prices heading? You know, are you think we're at a top, or there's more room to grow?
I think that Wynwood has really an infinite growth path. Sales are incredibly strong. So there's a host of retailers in the neighborhood doing well over 1,000 per square foot in sales. So the rent numbers that you see are completely justified. They're not just based on, you know, somebody trying to extract the most value. Those tenants and those businesses are actually really doing a lot of business. When you take that retail and that sales data and you look at being able to build another 7 stories of office and residential, which are really in demand in the neighborhood, I think there's a lot of room to grow, and very excited about the future development of the neighborhood.
And do you see any downsides? I mean, one thing that we talked about previously on our call together before the panel was, you know, when you're building a neighborhood, it's a detriment to have short-sighted landowners and people who are flipping and, you know, not having a long-term investment in the community. Are there concerns on that front, or in terms of city regulations?
I'll start with the city regulations. We, as the bid, drafted the city regulations on behalf of the city. So we couldn't be more confident in what we put together to really ensure the success of the neighborhood. The piece that we are very sensitive to is obviously as real estate gets very expensive, certain owners may be compromised in the types of decisions that they make and the types of businesses that they're going to put in their spaces. Mm-hmm. So for us, without really continuing to curate very interesting cultural users, very interesting, you know, food and beverage tenants, you know, these sort of entrepreneurs that have made the place so special, if we lose those and we lose all of them, you know, very quickly, we'll lose really the kind of the golden goose and the beauty of what that neighborhood is.
So when you hear Starbucks is looking there, does that concern you, or a one-off chain is not?
I'll give you an example, and it wasn't Starbucks, but a very well-known coffee brand from around the country that has multiple hundreds of units wanted to open in Wynwood. And they went down the list of every property owner in the neighborhood. Panther Coffee are my tenants, and he's my brother, and I love them, so of course I wouldn't be interested. But every single property owner turned that user down, and that user was going to pay the highest per square foot that had been seen in Wynwood to date.
Wow, that definitely says something. Let's see, who wants to tackle that next? Anna? Doral, what's the one stat that you point to when you talk about the future of the neighborhood?
I think Doral has a very bright future. I don't know if even 2 or 3 years ago, Doral would have been invited to be up here with some of these much hipper neighborhoods. So I think that is a testament to what we've done there. I think the 2 biggest statistics in Doral that point to how bright the future is there. The population of Doral right now, permanent population, is 45,000 people. The daytime population of the city of Doral triples. So you have over 150,000 people working in Doral, driving into the city every day in crippling traffic, who've had 0 options to have a very high quality lifestyle that's not suburbia in the area. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we have that many people driving whose livelihood is in the area, I think shows the bright future the neighborhood has, and the traffic. I mean, the traffic problems in Dade County have really helped us because people, you know, our generation, you know, Nitin was telling me how he walks his kids to school. You know, we have a school in our project. People want that. They want that quality of life. I think people are over being 45 minutes each way in the car and living their life on the road. They want to enjoy it. They want to be with their family. They want to be able to get to work quickly, get their kids to school. So I think offering that is really what's bright for the future.
And how about the buyer pool in Doral? It's obviously a haven for South American buyers. Has that, and you pre-sold your first residential tower there, is that a concern going forward, or are you trying to target a different buyer mix, or it's still going strong relative to other areas because it's more price sensitive?
I think in Doral, when it comes to condos, we created a market that didn't exist before. The demographics of Doral it's the most Hispanic city in the United States. And that's permanent residents, not investors. We have some investors, but permanent residents are attracted. The local market is coming. We're finding financing options for them, which was a challenge at the beginning. And frankly, our charter school has attracted a lot of interest. We have a 700 student waiting list. We opened in August, so the school didn't exist. We opened registration for next year, and we got 500 applications the first day. And there is a preference if you live in our project, so that has driven a lot of local buyers.
Do the financing options make up for the currency, the negative effect of the currency in general?
The financing options I talked are focused on the local markets.
Okay, got it. Michael, you next. My first question, what are you going to do with the $370 million?
Anybody have any ideas? No, I tell you, I've been really fortunate to be involved in the South Beach market for about 22 years. When I first got down to South Beach, at that point, there were 3 Payless shoe stores, a couple of Eckerd pharmacies, and some Burger Kings. And it's nice to see that it's really evolved. And I think when you talk about districts, and here in Miami Beach, we have a huge historic district, and I think that's really what created the backdrop for what is there today. And one of the challenges that you always have is merging contemporary retailing into historic structures. And I think that took a long time for us to work with the planning departments to really find ways to do that and to really make the spaces work and make them competitive for retailers. But Lincoln Road, of course, today has become one of the top high streets in the country. It's a street that we've worked on for quite a while. It's as the time goes on, it requires updating, and they've just approved a master plan developed by James Corner, and they will be doing all new street improvements, all new common area improvements to the pedestrian mall. And I think that's really important because it is really an amazing attraction. We're blessed with a big thing out there called the Big Blue Ocean, and which constantly attracts people to Miami Beach. And the beauty of what's happening on Lincoln Road and with the rising rents is it's forcing other areas to gentrify. And when you look at Lincoln Road, and I always am a big believer of not having a one-street district, you really need to expand the district to be able to compete with other projects like Miami World and other projects that we're talking about. And so the area of opportunity that I really see is the areas north of Lincoln Road, from Alton Road down to Washington Avenue. I think there's a lot of gentrification and infill development that can occur over there. But the nice thing about that is that about rents continuing to rise is that we spur new neighborhoods. You see Sunset Harbor being one of the more exciting neighborhoods for locals, and that's really what people want to be involved with today. You can take care of your fitness, your shopping, your boutiques, your lifestyle type of things, and I think people really gravitate towards that.
And what do you say when people say that there's this mallification happening on Lincoln Road? Do you think the new master plan is going to kind of temper that, or what sort of is your vision for?
I sort of think that the course is already set for Lincoln Road in terms of its mallification, if you will. I think that the nice thing is that areas off of Lincoln Road will be able to provide more affordable opportunities for tenants to come in, and more of the creative type tenants. And again, that's why you see areas like Sunset Harbor starting to take off and really take hold.
So the master plan basically calls for alleyways to be opened up and side streets. What sort of tenants do you see going in there? Will that be more of the incubator sort of?
Yeah, well, right now we just saw Pottery Barn Williams-Sonoma relocate north of Lincoln Road. They followed a trend that was started by CB2. We recently located a company called Suit Supply, which is really a hot retailer right now, growing around the country, and they've gone and taken the third level of a building right on 17th Street. So I think that with a little help from the city to develop some of these surface parking lots, which really don't help in this type of an environment, they don't really promote that pedestrian experience. I think we have to get that moving along, and that will help provide a home for these tenants.
And what has been the growth in rent since you bought back in 2000? And what were you kind of initially envisioning back when you bought in 2000? Were you picturing Apple and Nike?
Of course, everyone thought I was crazy when we bought the first building at about $300 a foot. Today, that's what we get in rent on an annual basis. But, you know, look, I think Miami Beach and Lincoln Road is an amazing place, and we're blessed with that opportunity. But, you know, I see new neighborhoods emerging and re-emerging all the time. You know, today we're making strong moves in Coconut Grove and South Miami. I see Coconut Grove as a major opportunity for re-merchandising. It's an organic village. It feels good. It has a lot of things going for it. It's surrounded by Miami's best year-round demographics. You have all the best schools. You have new residential, hotels, office. So I think all of those things really are necessary in order to really make a community jive.
Avra, how about you? With MIMO, it's interesting you've bought all these dilapidated motels and transformed them, starting with the Vagabond. It seems like one of the key things to a neighborhood is having sort of a certain amount of density and walkability in terms of, you know, making it really friendly to people who live and come there. How are you going to do that with MIMO? How does that going to kind of work? And you also mentioned something on the phone about, you know, in the next year you won't even recognize what it's like.
Yeah, so I'll take some of your refugee tenants from Lincoln Road. First of all, I just want to make a note for some of you who've never been here before. I remember when Real Deal had this first little get-together, and that's what it really was. It was a get-together. It was really good cocktail party. And now look at what's happened. So congratulations to the Real Deal and Levy Communications, because I think this speaks to where Miami is, and that in 4 years, where we were and where we are now is a difference between what I think was a big town and now really a city. You know, MIMO was interesting, which is Biscayne Boulevard between 51st and 77th Street. For the locals, we all know what that looked like 2 years ago. And we had our blinders on driving through because of the businesses that were being conducted there, which was a lot of prostitution, drugs. And we realized early on that if you bought the motels and shut down the place of business, you would change the neighborhood quickly. And that's what we did. And so, you know, we want metrics, I don't know, like, so the rents were, the daily rate was $80 a night, $20 an hour.
Do you still have those people showing up looking for rooms?
We did at first, and they were a little shocked when we said, no, we're 189. So, and I think a lot of people thought we were crazy, and for the real estate people here, I could not spreadsheet this deal. I did not get my typical investors to do this with me. It was all family and friends, because they really thought I had taken it. They knew I was out of the box, but they thought I was just way out of the box. And, you know, it's been a lot of fun, and we've been able to affect change. But, you know, yeah. Yeah, and the trick was, and the bigger story here was how quickly. Because typically in Miami, things always kind of took time. And the reason why we were able to do it quickly was because it was Main Street before, so we were just bringing it back. The residential was already there, unlike some of the challenges in some of our other urban warehouse neighborhoods, like Wynwood and Little River. So it was just, you know, the fundamentals were there. It was just about taking the blinders off. And, you know, so as far as the walkability and the density, it existed. You had the luxury housing behind there. You had Miami, you know, Morningside, Belmead. So, and you certainly had the 60,000 cars a day. So we were, you know, just in embracing the history, back to the history. I think people underestimate the importance of preservation and how much people are drawn to historic properties. I think that matters more than a lot of developers realize. That's part of what makes it soulful and contextual. I think we get a lot of people there because of that. And we also get a lot of goodwill from that. So working with the city, working with the local communities, they come, they support the businesses there because that's their way of thanking us and the small businesses for doing what they do.
And are there new retailers that, you know, haven't been announced yet that you know about that are going to sort of infill the area?
Well, I don't know. You can talk to Michael. He has his Comras now has signs on Biscayne Boulevard. That's when you know you've made it, right? And so you know. Maybe he can speak to that. But Bureau came over. They're in Midtown and they're on Purdy. They're there. A chocolate store just opened from Beacon Hill, #1 chocolate store in Boston. And if you walk in there, it's like Main Street. We have, you know, several. If I had I have more demand than I have real estate. And a lot of the top restaurant people from the beach are looking there because it's more affordable, more accessible, and because of the walkability. One of the things that I think is interesting is that we're talking about neighborhoods here. A few years ago, you wouldn't be talking about neighborhoods. And we all play well together, because what's good for Wynwood is good for us and certainly Little River. I've got a few of your refugees already. And you know, downtown and bringing, you know, more business and affordable, you know, lifestyle, and lifestyle being the key word, is really what makes this city as a whole do better. Because in the end, it's really about Miami. That's what, you know, New York's like that. There's different pocket neighborhoods, and that's what makes it interesting. So when tourists come and people come, now they want to stay longer. A lot of people come to the Vagabond for 3 nights, and they end up staying the week. They didn't realize how much there was to do here. Credit to Miami on the culture and the art scene. You know, Wynwood certainly being a draw.
Right. And I thought it was funny, we're moving into your area with a new office, and we were required to have a neon sign as part of our signage. I thought that was great. I mean, that really speaks to the fact that really, you know, even the city is looking to create a really specific, identifiable neighborhood. And you really do, like in New York, and where you can walk, you know, 10 blocks and be in a new neighborhood. And Miami is really starting to get more of that with the increased, you know, density, I think, it seems like. Nitin, on to you. Worldcenter. What's the outlook? What's the timeline for construction, and what are you guys looking at next?
So our situation was a little different because we didn't really have anything existing on property. We were the parking lots to the old arena, we're parking lots to the new arena. All of the buildings, as we bought them, we evicted all of the nightclubs when the leases went over. We ended up with 18, 20 art galleries. We set up a tech accelerator. Microsoft was kind enough to partner with us on that. So we had some great stuff, but it didn't make a dent because we own 30 acres of land and 28 of it is vacant. Then some really interesting things started to happen. We got our special area plan approved, which was great. We own most of the land, so that made it much easier. And then the Performing Arts Center obviously opened, and then the Perez Art Museum, and now the Museum of Science, and now there's talk of a museum conservancy, and obviously the heat. But a couple other things happened, you know, and I see my friend Armando Codina, he's responsible for 2 of them. All Aboard Florida announces this vision of a rail is finally happening. And as we all talk about traffic, it seems so obvious, and yet it wasn't for so long. And so we're blessed because we own 30 acres and they own 10 acres. So we've been planting 40 acres together, which has been really great. And then to the north, the Performing Arts Center, and Armando's also involved with Town Square Park. So they're looking at this entire area north of us to say we want to make sure we have a say as to how that evolves. So suddenly you have these big chunks of land where everyone is talking and communicating and trying to work together. So we set up our plan, and our biggest challenge when you own that kind of land and that kind of density is a lot of it has to go at the same time. You can't go block by block when everything is blight. And so we were fortunate that Bloomingdale's and Macy's came to us specifically because our retail partners will be Forbes and Taubman. MDM, great hotel company, locally amazing guys who are like this with Marriott. We're able to convince them to do the largest hotel in the state on our property. And All Aboard Florida's happening. So we decided to launch a signature condo tower, Paramount. We have 32 countries buying in this project. I mean, what other city, even New York doesn't get to boast that, right? This is Miami, 32 countries buying. So I think, as Avra said, like, we are a city. We are talking about neighborhoods. We're talking about a place that people from all over the world want to be or own a part of. And we also are doing a lot of rentals because we think that's important, especially because of the transit. We think there'll be this great energy and activity that's 24/7.
And in many ways, you have the biggest load to carry in a way because you have, you know, it's such a massive, massive project. How do you see you guys competing with Brickell City Center, and how is it looking for the rest of the retail space, leasing that up?
So we, historically, I wasn't really a retail person. You know, I just always wanted to grow up and be like Comras, but, you know, I didn't. So
Get in line.
But the challenge is when you're doing retail of this size, you can't just start it, right? And so we went and met with a number of big retailers and selected Forbes and Taubman because Forbes is a great private company. They only do one project at a time. We think they're the best in what they do. And Taubman's an 800-pound gorilla that can really throw around their might. So collectively, They've been very successful together. And because of that, we were able to get Bloomingdale's and Macy's. And because of them, our leasing's going very well. And we look forward to groundbreaking before year end.
Mm-hmm. Is there a specific announcement on other tenants that are coming down the line, or
You know, my sales team for Paramount would love if I could say some of the tenants, but unfortunately, these retail guys are a little shy.
No worries. And how about, you saw recently that some projects lowered the deposit requirement, the Brickell Heights O2 project, and there was a couple others earlier in the year. Is there any flexibility you're doing on that front, Anna or Nitin?
At Paramount Miami Worldcenter, we're 50% deposits.
50% deposits,
Yeah, we
okay.
haven't seen any pushback on
Got
that.
it.
And like I said, when 32 countries are buying at your project, we're not making any exceptions.
And Anna?
Yeah, we're still 50%, but like I mentioned, we're once we hit our pre-sale requirements, we are working with local buyers to help some sort of deposit structure that works for them, because we do feel that we want people living in our community, not just investors.
By the way, I want to say thank you guys for doing that, because that's what creates the stability in the marketplace. Knowing that people are putting up 50% deposits. When people talk about Miami, I don't think we're that roller coaster anymore. Let's not talk about that anymore. So I think that, and the developers have done a good job of keeping that discipline, so thanks for doing that.
And Avra, you recently bought the Miami River Inn. Can you tell me a little bit about that area, and how do you plan a project out like that? I mean, do you buy something with the idea that you can mothball it for the next cycle if that was necessary, or do you buy it thinking, and I mean, it's pretty remarkable that you went with the Vagabond. You bought it 2 years ago, right? And it's already was up and running a year later. So obviously you have a pretty quick turnaround time on your projects. But what's your thinking on something like that?
Well, I'm a boutique developer, so I don't have the luxury of, the lift involved to do what Nitin did and to assemble all that property. It's not just the assemblage, but then it's the carry. And then it's the community outreach, it's a lot of things. Certainly, I've had the luxury of learning from Tony Goldman. I originally developed in New York. And so I do things sort of as of right. I don't take on the big monsters. And when I bought the River Inn, it was really about the property and the location. And our plan is to be open December, January. We're doing historic renovation. One of the challenges in Little Havana, which, and I think that, and they've actually talked about speaking to Wynwood because you guys did such a good job of organizing. When you have a lot of small property owners, it's very difficult sometimes to get everybody on the same page and get things done. And I think that what Wynwood pulled off was remarkable. In Little Havana, I think that's part of the challenge. There's a lot of different community groups with different agendas. Getting everybody on the same page is probably one of the things that's, holding it back.
So you mentioned Wynwood. Joe, what do you see as the residential and our hotel future of Wynwood? The first project there was just completed. I've heard something about Goldman planning a hotel. What do you think's
Sure. Just
next?
Before I get into that, I just want to make a comment about Tony Goldman and sort of piggyback what Avra said. I started with Tony in 2008 when, of course, there was not a lot going on anywhere. And Tony Goldman taught me, he worked every day harder than anybody else, put his money where his mouth was, and didn't wait or make excuses as to why things weren't happening. And that attitude is really what started the community outreach, how we put people together. We first formed a neighborhood association called the Wynwood Arts District Association in 2009. That was, we would put these meetings together. We'd have first 20 people, 50 people, 100 people, 150 people, and that gave the neighborhood the legs to get to the business improvement district. And bids are used widely around the country, but not as much in Miami. And there are 7 board members. I'm the chairman of the bid. And through that organization, we were able to speak for over 450 properties and, countless owners to come up with a, cohesion, the right vision, and the right plan for the neighborhood. So without that type of work, with that type of organization, we'd probably not be where we are today. And it's a very, very important piece that I think a lot of people don't really pay attention to. They just sort of look at the neighborhood and said, oh, wow, that's great. All these warehouses got painted and now the place is something special. But there's a lot more work that goes into making that than just, paint and a couple of good tenants.
And how about residential in Wynwood? What do you think's next on that front?
Yes. So the one building that most of you probably know, 250 Wynwood, was developed by my another brother of mine. We're very close with everyone in the neighborhood. It's 11 units. That was built under the old zoning code. So we can't build viable and successful projects for the people that want to be in Wynwood under that zoning. So by way of example, the exact same site next door, David is building another building. Instead of condos, it'll be rentals, and he'll have 50 units. So if you can imagine, in a beautiful, beautiful scale, a 6, 7-story scale, as high as 8 in the core of the neighborhood, you can have real density. We also created a provision of our code, which I'm very excited about, which is if you build units smaller than 650 square feet, you don't have to provide any parking on-site or off-site. You can pay into a parking improvement trust fund. So, of course, the idea here was to create a diverse mix of product to allow people who, maybe can't afford a 1,500 square foot unit, but that want to be in Wynwood to have a place to stay. So I think because of the zoning and because of how sensitive we were to trying to create a market for a broad range of people, I think Wynwood in the future will be the most diverse and most interesting place for people to call home in the city. And of course, I'm very biased about our retail program and the types of retailers that make people really want to be there.
And your biggest project right now is actually a parking garage, is that right? So it's 8 stories?
Correct. So the parking garage is 8 stories, 21,000 feet of retail on the ground, 434 parking spaces, and 20,000 feet of office on the top.
And is that with a kind of idea that Wynwood's going to be a walkable place and you want to kind of concentrate the parking in one area and have it be pretty pedestrian friendly?
Absolutely. So we did a few things through the zoning. We reduced parking requirements. We have very favorable setbacks. We don't want to lose the character of Wynwood and get into, with all due respect to what happens in Brickell, a building with a big pedestal that doesn't really feel friendly to the pedestrian. So every decision we made, every part of our program was how do we make this the most exciting place for the human, at the human scale, as opposed to thinking how we could sell a lot of units above the 8th story. So it's a much different type of framework. And frankly, I believe even though we're capped and we downzone the neighborhood in some cases, I think the retail success will help people really underwrite projects even though they can't build above the 8 stories, 12 stories in certain circumstances.
And when you're building out new neighborhoods, is there a point at which you're sort of competing against yourself when you, Nitin, for example, start amassing parcels and you're going one by one and then suddenly you're paying higher and higher prices?
There were a couple holdouts, but we bought 43 parcels in so many different entities. It's funny, when we brought in our capital partner 5 years later, they were like, why do you have such a convoluted org chart? And I said, well, we had 17 attorneys doing it. We tried to be quiet about it. So fortunately, we amassed most of it before people realized it, so it worked out. But yeah, there were a few holdouts there.
How do you keep it that secret? You just use a lot of LLCs?
It's a complete pain. But we needed to do it because what we knew in that area, again, because we were it was parking lots, so we couldn't take a street and start there. It was, if everything else was parking lots and we owned a block, we couldn't do anything. And before us, there were a few other developers that had attempted to, but they couldn't get that critical mass. So what we knew is if we were going to do it, we needed to go on a very big scale.
And do you require confidentiality when you sign agreements with the...
Confidentialities don't go so far in Miami. So yes, but we didn't count on them.
You try to. And when did you assemble your first parcel? I mean, you were in your 20s. This was how many years ago?
So I was naive enough to think that it would happen quickly and we could move on. So, I was just young enough and naive enough to believe in it. But, my parents... I got a lot now. I got a lot. My parents started off in small motels on Fort Lauderdale Beach. And when spring break ended up there, they believed in transforming Fort Lauderdale Beach. And we just announced a partnership with Four Seasons in Fort Lauderdale. My brother's still there carrying on that legacy, developing the Four Seasons, doing the Gale, so preserving a historic boutique hotel there and adding condos. We're doing a bunch up there. And so, it was in our blood, I guess, gluttons for punishment. My brother and I left and went to New York and worked on Wall Street because we said, why would anyone invest this type of time and energy in years of their life? And here we both are doing just that.
It's great. Avra, can you tell me about the times you were tailed by other cars looking in different new neighborhoods?
That was me. I just couldn't get her to pick up the phone, so I had to chase her out.
Yeah, he drives a nice Mercedes. No, so yeah, I actually went up and I tapped on the guy's window, and I said, listen, if you're interested in the neighborhood, what would you like to know? I mean, I'm probably more transparent than I need to be. I said, you don't mind when, and I'm sure you could speak to this too, Joe, it's when people come and buy your neighborhoods, that's a good thing. The problem is when people come and buy, and I call them spoilers, and they're just coming to ride the wave because they're thinking you're going to need to buy it, or because, oh, Avra's going to develop because I do, and then the value of my property will go up and I'll flip it. So, I asked the person, well, what are your ideas? What's your plans? And he goes, oh, I'm a user. And I go, okay, well, what are you looking for? Maybe I can help you. And because in the end, we don't have to do all the work. Of course, you are. But, we don't really, it's not about us doing the work. The trick is to get other people in your neighborhood that are like-minded. So he didn't end up buying in the neighborhood, but I think he, hopefully he ended up in Wynwood.
And is there any one thing you try to avoid in the development you're doing?
Try to avoid. I try to avoid needing anything from the city. So So everything I look at is as of right, no variances, and because it's a lot to do. And one of the advantages in doing adaptive reuse and taking existing warehouses, we've bought a big section in Little River, not too far from Biscayne, and is becoming sort of an alternative for those people who can't afford Wynwood. Is when you buy existing buildings, first of all, it's sustainable. But second, then you avoid having the impact fees sometimes. You're as of right for parking. If it has a previous use and I don't need the 12-inch water main. And so we work very hard to try to avoid those things because they change deals, and more importantly, they slow you down.
Mm-hmm.
So can I add a comment to that? I think people that aren't in our business really don't understand how favorable the adaptive reuse parking provisions are of the city of Miami. It's good. And what it does is it allows people to be creative. It allows people to come in at a lower basis. And it allows people to be in a space that has character to it that may not just be storefront and glazing systems. And it's really been the key to our success in Wynwood, and we'll continue to do it and build great buildings into that. But that's the fabric that makes the place relevant.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, is it tough to specialize in more than one neighborhood? I mean, you've been doing Lincoln Road for a while, and among all your projects now, what are you most excited about?
I tell you, we're very lucky because I have a great team in my office, and we cover projects throughout Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County. And I'm very fortunate enough to be able to touch a lot of the different neighborhoods as we go through them. We just recently acquired Cocoa Walk in Coconut Grove with Federal Realty and a local company called Grass River. And, one of the things about neighborhoods is everybody has to work together. I think everybody who knows Coconut Grove from 15, 20 years ago may have hung out at Cocoa Walk and stumbled out of there at one point. But, today Coconut Grove is on a major rise. And we see that, when you're building a neighborhood, you need to work with your neighbors. You need to talk to them. It's all about building community and building co-tenancy. And one of the things that's special about Coconut Grove, it's a very walkable, organic village. So we are spending a lot of time right now talking to the community and talking to those areas because it's about time we brought Cocoa Walk back to the people who actually live around there. When you look at the number of students, you have 6,000 students that come to Coconut Grove every day, 3,200 private school students. That's a lot of people, parents, bringing their kids to school every day and not having a place to hang out. So I think if we're effective in what we're looking to do and everybody works together and brings something, it becomes accretive to those different neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And I think being walkable, being sustainable is really important. Mm-hmm. I think the densification of Miami is leading to localization. People don't want to leave their neighborhoods anymore. The more the traffic it gets more intense, the less people want to commute. They want to live, work, and play in those neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. And in Cocoa Walk, are the rents now in terms of on the retail front, and where do you think they can go? And also, do you think you'll see some slowing down there in terms of, tourists coming in or South American traffic and that sort of thing?
I think right now, over the last several years, while Coconut Grove has really been down, really the people that have been supporting it is the tourists. I think right now, with the major changes that are going on, you have a lot of new property owners. Bernardo Fort, Arquitectonica, acquired a property. He was successful in bringing in Harry's Pizza and Panther Coffee. Mm-hmm. We complemented that by bringing a company called Kit and Ace, which was started by the folks of Lululemon, and TKS from Sunset Harbor. So one of the great secrets in Coconut Grove is most of those restaurateurs not only have one restaurant there, they have two, which is pretty amazing because very quietly they have been making a lot of money over the years. Now the attention has reached all over, and we're getting all of the people who used to go and have stores in Coconut Grove and restaurants in Coconut Grove all want to come back. And so we see it as an area where you had a shopping center called Mayfair. It was 200,000 square feet. They competed directly with Coco Walk and the rest of the village. Today, that's 100% occupied by creative office tenants. Mm-hmm. So there's been a major move of creative office tenants coming into the Grove. Sapient Nitro just moved from South Beach and brought 600 jobs right to the heart of the village. David Martin, Terra, Related are building magnificent projects along the water. Those twisty buildings are probably some of the nicest buildings I've seen go up in quite a while, and I'm sure everybody has seen those. Yeah. Again, these areas of Brickell, which is going to be phenomenal, when you stand at, and we're representing tenants going right into the heart of Brickell, you stand at South Miami Avenue at A Street, and you look around, and you just imagine what that density is going to be in the next few years, and it's going to be complete gridlock. Now, some would say that's bad, some will say that's good, but some would just say that's just like New York City. But I think, Brickell is going to provide amazing, Brickell City Center, Mary Brickell Village, all the new residential, all the new hotels, all the new offices. That's a self-sustaining city in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And I think each of these areas are just becoming stronger and stronger, and that's why you see what's happening in Wynwood, you see what's happening in the Design District, you see what's happening in Little River. These areas will continue to gentrify, and as long as everybody is true to what they want to do and continue to make them better places and work together and create these walkable communities, that's what people want.
Yeah, no. I'm going to ask one more question and turn it over to audience Q&A. What was it takes a lot of perseverance to shape an entire neighborhood, and the facts and figures might speak for themselves or projections about population growth. But obviously, you can get some pretty nasty receptions, I'm sure. What was the worst pitch or meeting you ever had in terms of getting financing or getting rejected over a neighborhood? Avra, when you told, I don't know who in your family invested in the project, but when you tried to sell them on the Vagabond Motel, did you bring them by and they were looking at people, coming and going?
It's better not to bring them by.
Right.
Yeah.
Look at it on paper.
And there's a few people, I've done that in a few neighborhoods. So, I think... I'm fortunate enough to have a track record. A lot of my investors are out of New York, and they saw what I did in New York before I came here, so I think I'm fortunate. But the fundamentals still have to make sense. The financing, typically the projects I do, I will not get financing. So that's just a given. I don't count on that going into a deal, and I think that's part of it. I think for you all who are doing the bigger projects, obviously that's a big part of the equation because it's one thing to assemble, it's another thing to grow it. So I think that one of the things that we try to do, and I think Tony Goldman did a good job, is at least buy value. So if we're buying existing buildings, they're still below replacement costs. Or I'm buying, Vagabond was 56,000 square feet of land, so $2 million, kind of like, well, what's the worst that happens? So I think that my discipline is always like, well, what's the worst that happens? And if I'm right, this is what would happen. And what if the whole neighborhood took off? Then what could really, I don't know if we'll be Lincoln Road, but so I think for financing is usually not in my equation.
Nitin, how about you? What's the hardest meeting you've had over?
I can't say just one. So I tell a joke about how when we started this, everyone thought we were crazy. And in 2009 and 10, when we were recapitalizing, they just thought we were stupid. So I had about 100 meetings, I'd say, where people came to Miami, and you'd say, the Performing Arts Center is successful, the museums are coming, transit's coming, the tunnels. People just thought we were stupid. Right now, today, they call us lucky, and I think we are lucky because Miami's become this incredible city. So I would say it's probably about 100 meetings between January of 09 and January of 10.
You must have a thick skin.
I do now.
Michael?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to just go back to the neighborhoods for a second.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that's really important, because we have all these nodes that are developing around the city. And you look at, right here, we're in the design district, and we look at Midtown. And it's almost like never the two shall meet. And we're working on a project now called District 36, which is being developed by the MAC Group and Wharton Equity. And that's a project that I believe links the districts. You know, because people in the design district need to have goods and services that are in Midtown. People in Midtown want to have the benefit of the shops and restaurants in the design district. So the interesting thing is taking these districts and finding a way to connect them. So I think connectivity is really important. And one of the challenges that we have is an urban situation where you have the 195 that cuts through and really bisects the two districts. So we've been really focused on the challenge of, and you say, why was it so hard? I had a huge tenant, we're sitting in Midtown, and I was showing him the site, and he says, you know, we walk over and we look at this urban condition of this underpass, and he says, I really want to be north of the bridge. And I walked over and I looked at it and I'm like, I can understand why he was saying that. So I set off on a mission to work with the parking authority to say, hey, how do we take this underpass and take this negative situation and make it the greatest underpass that we could possibly make it. So that becomes a place where people will talk about, oh, I got to go check out that underpass. But that underpass is so important to connect these districts. And these urban conditions are ones where you just take a negative and turn it into a positive, and it becomes very easy. You know, you place some restaurants with cafes and some cafe seating outdoors, you know, because people like to see people. So to me, it's all about connecting these districts.
Right. That's interesting. I mean, when you get to the density level where you can walk from one neighborhood to another, you know, in New York, that's kind of the situation. If your neighborhoods bleed into one another, and then it becomes really dynamic and walkable.
And when you look at Wynwood to the south, I mean, ultimately that will connect, you know, into the Omni area and so on. So all of these areas ultimately need to connect, and I think that's should be the goal of everybody, is really to try and figure out how to connect these districts.
I wanted to open it up to a couple audience Q&A. Yes, sir?
Andres from Fortune. I just want to say congrats because you guys are really creating amazing neighborhoods. I'm born and raised in South Beach, and congrats on the Vagabond. You know, so many people are going over there and hanging out and listening to the music, and what you're doing is fantastic. Same thing with Wynwood and Mike and Nitin and all of you. So you're actually creating true neighborhoods and making us sell Miami that much easier and better, and making us proud of where we live. And just a quick note on the 30% comment for Brickell Heights, because I saw a lot of these projects. The only reason why that project specifically is 30% is because it's only 10% left to sell. But across the board, everybody's still doing 50%.
Yes, ma'am?
Hello, congratulations also. I'm copying Andres. Well, my name is Pina Armentano. I am from Argentina. One of the things that I absolutely think that is important is that not only selling a building, because we are, I am an international broker, always they sell a building, and as you said, it's important to develop neighborhoods. No, because that means that Miami is not only a beach place, but it's a really place to live. No, that's important. Another thing, the pre-construction market has gone up very high, no, or has gone higher than before when it was the crisis. Why do you think that the secondary market, the old buildings, didn't go so high or didn't went higher as the last crisis? The prices are still very down, comparing with the prices that were at the highest point before the crisis. Why do you think is that? Yeah.
Oh, well, no, I mean, in Wynwood, I think in the last cycle, the highest price for a warehouse building was probably $150 a foot, and now they're at $1,500. So in Wynwood, we're not experiencing that at all. We're experiencing the most explosive pricing acceleration that I could have ever imagined.
But in other areas?
Yeah, look, I think that a lot's changed this round of development than last. And so if you look at, right adjacent to our property, Zaha Hadid's project at $1,200, $1,300 a foot, Why are they getting that? Because Zaha Hadid is the architect. It's, this exoskeleton, internationally world-designed architecture. It's beautiful. And people are developing differently. And part of what they're doing is they're selling off the neighborhood that we're creating. With Paramount, we're creating an entire lifestyle and neighborhood that we're selling. And you've been a supporter of the project, and you've seen it's just the design, and it's for people to actually live and to enjoy a city. Whereas last cycle, I think a lot was just built as investment. So people weren't paying attention to the details. Not to say there aren't some amazing buildings from last cycle. There absolutely are. I think that this round, 10 years later, just like our city has grown, our projects have exploded into this unique world-class projects. And that's where I think it's different.
We're going to do one more question, and if you have additional questions, you can just come to the stage. Yes, over there.
Hi, Nitin. I want to hear about your soccer field. Is it true it's going on the top, on the roof?
Yeah, so at Paramount, we have a 7-acre amenity deck. And so on top of that, we have the ability to do great things. So I have young kids, so I think, well, I want a kids park there, right? Because as the city evolves, as Michael's talking about, people will be more isolated to their neighborhoods. And so if I live in this condominium building and I have young kids, there's a kids park. Well, my friends come over and we want to play soccer, that would be pretty cool, or tennis. So we tried basketball, but then our salespeople told us that would just annoy people because the bouncing would echo around. And some of our neighbors would probably get upset as well. So, we tried to create something very unique up there. So yes, a soccer field will be part of that. But, before we end, I just want to comment on something Michael was saying, because Avra and I were having a sidebar. The single most important thing that we should all be talking about or focused on is transit and connectivity.
Yes.
I'd say the biggest bet we made on our neighborhood was that transit would come. And again, thank you to my friend Armando, because this concept of 40 acres of land being combined, where someone can take a train originally from Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach to downtown Miami, and now with Tri-Rail, the fact that we actually debated should we have Tri-Rail connecting to downtown shows you how insane our policies are with transit. But now with our location, we think about 5 stops on the Metro Mover, 1 stop on the Metro Rail, which takes us down to the Grove or the airport. Now Tri-Rail taking us up into all these other emerging neighborhoods that have popped up. This is incredible. And now, if we could actually do a Bay Link and connect Miami Beach to downtown, if we could do a streetcar that would connect into Wynwood. And so we have in Town Square with the Performing Arts Center, we have that same issue. People think about us south of 395 and north of 395. And it took 15 years to convince them to elevate this so that the Performing Arts Center can connect to the rest of downtown. All of these things seem obvious, but just like all of these projects and these revitalizations, they all take time and persistence. And a lot of people think it just happens. It doesn't. It's tireless effort and persistence from a lot of people that are in this room. And so I encourage everybody to scream and yell at every politician about improving transit, because we're all going to need it.
All right, I think we're going to end there. And I just want to say, thinking big and putting soccer fields on top of skyscrapers, that's really thinking big. And, credit to these guys for shaping the neighborhoods they've been working in. So thanks so much, and thanks for everybody in the audience.